Hello, in this video we're going to be dealing with checkpoints. I've been through checkpoints and tried different methods for quite some time now, and I've come across this way, which seems to be perhaps one of the easiest ways to program the game into performing checkpoint areas. We're going to be dealing with three types of checkpoints, or three settings of checkpoints. The first checkpoint will be a progressive checkpoint, whereby as a player progresses through a map, they will activate checkpoints, and should they backtrack and die, they will still respawn at the furthest checkpoint that they made it to. The second type will be checkpoints that will reactivate upon entering those areas, so that when a player dies they will be respawned to the nearest place that they died at. And the third type of checkpoint will be set up for multiplayer maps, where you want each player to be spawned upon how far that particular player reached the checkpoint. So what we do is I'll just explain what I've set up here. I've set up a starting area for the player start. I've set up a line of rooms, and in each of the rooms I've set a way of killing the player, so that we can check them out later when we play the game. I've colour coded them, and so for the purpose of the tutorial this will be the red room because it has the red kill trigger, the blue room, the green room, and lastly the yellow room. And what we're going to do is we're going to place a checkpoint in each of these rooms, and then we'll go into the map and we'll check them out. So first of all we'll start off by building the logic. Okay, first off we need a player start. I'll place that there. Next we need a module game setting. Place that there, I think. And now we need a variable, and if you're unfamiliar with variables, I'm probably going to go into a bit too much detail for the more advanced user, but I think it's worth it for people that are new to Snapmaps. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a variable. Variables are ways of telling the game that upon this happening do this, upon that happening do that, and it's a varied effect that will allow you to change certain features and get it to do certain things. So with this particular form of logic, I just need a change. I need something to change. So we're going to choose a boolean, which is a yes or no, a true or false variable. When placing variables, you find the variable you want, you click once and it gives you your placement, you place it, and if you haven't got a variable already set up you will add new, so you click add new and then cancel off of that, so that you're left with the boolean that you've just placed. If you happen to place another one, you'll get this screen, and what you would do is you would either create a new one or use an existing one. So what we've got there is we've got our boolean. We're going to reference it and give it a name. We'll call it checkpoint, and then we'll give it a special icon to make it a bit more straightforward. We can spot that that's the icon we're using for our checkpoints, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one. Whether it's true or false makes no difference in this, and so we'll start building the logic. First thing we need to do is set this player to enable on start. We're set to false. Click on module and we go on player entering the module, the room, we will toggle this boolean, our checkpoint boolean. And so what that's done is that's telling it to change that variable, whether it be true or false, to switch it to its opposite. So if it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true. In this instance that we're building, it makes no difference whether it's true or false. We just need to tell the boolean that when it's changed, it will disable this player start. Now it's already disabled, so every time a player comes into this room, because of that logic, the boolean will flip to either true or false, but because it's changed, it's going to disable that player start. I'm just switching the logic around a bit there so we can see it a bit better. Next thing I want to do is I want to say to the game that when the player enters this module, it's going to enable this player start. And that might seem a bit weird, but all become apparent. So we tell it to enable the player start. So we've got a contradiction there. And what we need to do is we need to tell the game that, you know what, it's disable every time they're entering the room, it's disabling the player start, but after it's performed that function, we'll tell it to enable this one particular player start. And so we click on enable player start and we give it a fraction of a second delay, so that now the player enters the room, it toggles to yes or no. Because it's changed, that player is disabled, and it will be disabled for every reference point we place that checkpoint in. So for every place we put a checkpoint, in this room, in this room, in this room, that variable will be toggled. So after it toggles all those variables, because the player's in just this one room, it will now enable that player start, and that becomes the new spawn point. Okay, so the very last feature I wanted to add was a visual aid to the player to know that the checkpoint has been activated. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on player start entered, and we're going to add a communication of a message, and we'll place that, and we tell it to show. Okay, let's just neaten this up a bit. Okay, and we could name the message, so we'll call it checkpoint message. And then we will tell it what to say, so it'll come up on the screen as checkpoint changed. Point changed, and we'll leave it up for 3 seconds. Okay, so that's done. There's all the logic for it. Let's try and neaten it up such a way that we can pick it up and drop it around the map. Okay, it's not too bad. So if we click on player start, we will select all, duplicate, and place one in every room, and this would be every place that you want a checkpoint. You would do this. And last but not least, the red room. And that's done. Okay, so now What we don't want to do is, upon entering the game, none of the players will start. So the very first one, where the game's going to begin, we're going to enable the player start there, and we don't want it to tell the players that the checkpoint has changed. So for the very first one, we delete that section, and we're ready to give it a whirl. So around here I've got some plasma. Oops, deleted it. And just grab that and we'll place that here. So we'll give that a whirl and we'll check that out and make sure that all works. And then we'll go ahead and set them so that they will constantly update themselves. At the moment these are only going to change once. As the player moves through the map, they'll change once, and the player will constantly spawn at the furthest point that they've made it. Okay, so first off, we're in the first room. We're going to kill ourselves and we should respawn in the first room, the starting room, which we have. Now we're going to head on through here. Checkpoint changed. We die here and we should restart in this room. Okay, which we have. We're in the yellow room. Going to make our way. We'll skip the green room and we'll head through to the blue room. Kill ourselves here and see that we've respawned in the blue room, which we have. And then finally I'll make it into the red room. I won't kill myself here, but we'll go back to, say, the green room, and notice how the checkpoint changed message isn't coming up, and I'll show you why that is when we go back into the editor. So we'll kill ourselves here. Because we went to the red room, we should spawn in the red room, which we have done. So that's fine, that's worked a treat. So now we go back to the editor, and to change this so that the checkpoints are constantly updating, all we need to do is, upon entered, on each of the logic for each of the checkpoints, we tell it that it can run more than one time. So on entered, we will run that more than once. On entered, we'll run more than once, and we just go through the whole process changing that setting. True. Oops, what happened there? That one was already set to false. Doesn't matter. Okay. So they should all be false now. Let's just double check that. False. 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 And false. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run that now, and they should constantly update themselves. There's different ways of setting up the trigger for this. You could have a switch, an interactive switch, and instead of using a module command, you can tell the players that every time they hit the switch that it updates the checkpoint. Okay, we're back in the map. Kill ourselves just to check the very first player start, and we started here. Checkpoint changed. Checkpoint changed. We'll go back into, we'll kill ourselves in the green room, and we should respawn in the green room, and then we'll go back in the yellow room. Checkpoint changed, so we'll kill ourselves in the yellow room, and we should respawn in the yellow room, which we have. And just the very last check, we just head off to the red room, kill ourselves in the red room, and we should respawn in the red room. Okay, so that's worked. So that's how to do those constant updating checkpoints. I've been through the checkpoints that we set up earlier and I've deleted them all, so we've got a bit of a blank canvas to start building our new checkpoints. They're better for multiplayer use, where you've got more than one player. On the previous examples, what can happen is say player 1 could race down to this checkpoint, player 2 could die in this room here but would spawn up at this point because that was the last checkpoint reached by all of the players. And while that might suit some maps that you design, you might want to have a separate trigger for different players. So unfortunately we can no longer use the module setting, so we need to delete that, and we'll delete the on player start. Other than that, everything else remains the same upon the settings that we've done last time, the logic that we've done last time. Okay, so what we need for this is a trigger. I'm going to use a box trigger. If you wanted to use an interactive, like a switch or something like that, you can do. In this example we're going to use a trigger, but it'll work equally as well with whatever you decide, whether you want to place an interactable, like let's have a look, these, a panel or a pressure plate. Okay, right, so let's just resize this to a suitable size for a doorway. Make it fairly wide, fairly tall. You don't have to place these over doorways. If you wanted to say put them across an entire room in the middle, you can do. I'm just going to use doorways because they segregate areas quite neatly. Alright, on start we want it to be disabled. We'll make it solid, and we'll also give it a colour to reference the triggers between players. So we'll have a different colour for each player that we set up, and so we'll change that to a red. Okay, yeah, red for player. No, we'll have blue for player 1, I think. Okay, and then you leave make human usable. You don't want that, so leave that as false. You don't need a message. We don't want it to remove. The trigger will be resettable upon that player entering that new zone, so we'll leave that as no. We set a custom filter to player 1, and then the cooldown will deactivate, so we'll set that to 0, and that's the settings for your trigger. Now what we'll do is we'll pick up this lot and we'll move it. Pick up this lot and that, and we'll move it to just in front of our doorway. Okay, I need to do this a bit differently, so I'll select that and then make the player start the last thing I select, and then we'll move it. That's better. I've got the bit for the player start. I'll put that fairly close to our trigger. Right, the trigger acts as the as the switch for this variable. So what we need to do, I've just noticed that we delete that. Oh, hang on. Just delete that player start there. Okay, right, so we click on the box trigger and we say on entered. We will show our message, and then from on entered we will toggle our variable, our boolean, and then on entered we will enable player start. And remember, we need to change that enable player start to a we have to delay it. So I'm just bringing all these up a bit flatter and clearer so it shows us everything that we've got of our logic. So we just set that to a split-second delay. So what will happen is when the player enters that trigger, it is going to change the checkpoint, and the message will say so. It will then change our variable to either true or false, but because it's changed, it will disable that player, and then a split second afterwards it will reactivate that player, so that we know that all of the other checkpoints will be disabled, but on this particular trigger effect it will enable the player. And so we can go ahead. The last thing we need to do is make that box trigger, we need to make that box trigger as usable by player 1. I think we've already done that. Okay, and then the player start doesn't need we'll need a spawn point as well. So if we now put in custom filter, spawn filter to player 1, so that is now unique to player 1, and we apply that. Okay, and what we do is we select all, and we will duplicate, and we'll place this at every point there's a doorway. It's just a case of rinse and repeat. And notice that we're placing them at the end of the doorways, the opposite end of where our players will be heading in the direction of the map. And I'll explain that in a minute. Let's just place these here. Last one. The last one will be triggered on that doorway there. Okay, so last thing we need to do is twist this round. So I'll rotate that around and then position it there. Okay. Right, so now we've got all our player 1 set up. I've just missed the doorway there. Yeah, I have. This one needs to be rotated back round. Nobody said it was going to be easy. Okay, so that is now placed there, and it was this one I needed to reverse round. So let's pick her up and twizzle around. She's in it, he or she's in this room here. Okay. Right. That covers player 1. What we're going to do is we're going to recreate this but for player 2 now. And so what I should do is I should duplicate that and place it just outside here for now for us to work on. 2 settings is, the first setting is custom the filter of the trigger and make it player 2, and the next thing we need to do is the player start and customize that for custom filter of player 2. We'll change the colour of the box trigger for us so that we know it is another trigger set up for a different player, and we do that as red on this occasion, and I think we're good to go with that one. So now what we'll do is we'll place player 2, but we'll only place him on 2 of the rooms, just so that the purpose that we can check it out. So what we'll do is we will move that one and we'll place him on the green room. Okay, and duplicate, and we'll place one in the red room, which will be here. Okay, like I say, the point of spawning, I'll position them a bit better at a later date, but the position of spawning will be the blue player, the player 1 will make their way through here, and that will activate this checkpoint, so when they die in this room they will respawn in this room. Then when they hit this checkpoint for the green room, they'll actually be just spawning just inside this room, but for the effect of the green room. I think what we can actually do is we can move that player start so they will actually spawn in the green room. But we won't do that on this instance. Then the blue player again will have the spawn position for the blue room and so forth. Now, because they're triggers, whereas before when you used to go backwards and forwards through the map, it would just spawn you in the spawn place for the room. So when we actually come to play it, the player will be trundling through here, go through this box trigger, come up to here, die, and then they'll be spawned back here. When they go through this way, the player will walk through this way, activate that checkpoint, kill themselves on here, and then they'll be spawned back here. And so players are going to be working from back to front. Right. What the last thing we need to do is create a spawn point, and so we select all this. We don't need that, we don't need that, that, or that, or that. Right, so just need to set this to player 1, and then we will select player slot. We need to change that to 1 so that we start the game in player 1 mode, and then we'll run the map and test it out. So player 1, every single checkpoint is active, so we should appear on every single checkpoint, and then we'll load the map in as player 2 and check that only the green room and the red room will work. Okay, so we're loaded in. Kill ourselves. And we've respawned where we should. Checkpoint changed. Kill ourselves. We should appear just on this side, which we have. Make our way through. Checkpoint changed. Again, because we're heading in this direction, it spawns us at that side of the room. Go for this one. This will be the blue room, so we will spawn at the blue room. And lastly the red room. We can see that as we die each time, the checkpoint's spawning us at the correct zone, but also it's telling us every time we pass through that the checkpoint's changed. Okay, so checkpoint changed, and then checkpoint changed. So let's go back into the snap map and we'll set it for player 2 and we'll try them out. Okay, so we want that to spawn player 2, and we also want to change the loading settings that will be spawned as player 2, and then we'll give it a whirl. And there's only two for player 2. There's only 2 checkpoints. Well, in a normal game you would probably set checkpoints for all players at all destinations. Doing it this way just for the purpose of testing out the map. Okay, spawned in the player start. And we've respawned in the player start. No checkpoint there, so we should respawn in the player start. Yep. And then we'll go through past this and we'll go past the green room. Now that's activated us for the green room spawn, so we should spawn in the green room now. Yep. And we head on through. That's the green point checkpoint telling us it's changed. We're heading to the red room. Kill us there, and we will respawn just side of that doorway. Yep.